In this video, I want to defend Rand's view on the blank slate. This is the assumption that man's mind is empty initially, and that all knowledge is acquired by learning. No knowledge is inert to man. I agree with that, and most objections to this come from a confusion about the definition of knowledge in Rand's claim. For example, if you count as knowledge that any human being knows that having a hand on a hot plate is bad, and then what better pulls it away quickly, then of course there is inert knowledge. No one's disputing that kind of thing. Consider for a moment what it would mean if that kind of knowledge wasn't inert. It would mean that each infant has to burn himself at least once, observe the damage being done to his body, and from that conclude to avoid further contact with excessive heat. In effect, the entire pleasure-pain mechanism of any life form, including human beings, implies some form of inert information. But that is, of course, not knowledge in the epistemological sense. It is not stored conceptually, and it's not stored in what Rand called the rational faculty. And it's the rational faculty that is a blank slate, not the human mind in the wider sense. There are, of course, many components in the human mind besides the rational faculty. One very interesting example is facial recognition. Infants are able to recognize a smiling face and take it to mean something good pretty much as soon as they get a stable lock on another pair of eyes. Facial expressions are another, more sophisticated form of inert knowledge. But this is not a contradiction to objectivist doctrine. It's the rational faculty that is a blank slate, and the information about facial expressions is located elsewhere. In fact, since that kind of information is not even conceptual, it can't be stored there. The images that a human eye is recording are not entering the rational faculty directly. There must be quite a bit of pre-processing going on, and for the point I want to make, I don't need to know how exactly all of this is working. I'm sure it's very complex. It's merely important to see that the image data reaches the rational faculty pre-processed. The sensory input is the raw image, but in the Randian jargon, the information that reaches the rational faculty is called a sensation. So this is the rational faculty, and the information coming from the eye is called a sensation as it goes into the rational faculty. An analogy in computers would be that sensory information is what the webcam records, but the sensation is whatever comes into the CPU over its data bus. For example, you look at a yellow smiley face. So the green and red photoreceptor cells on your retina are firing. That's the sensory input. This information is then somehow processed, but part of it reaches the rational faculty relatively directly, and you feel the color yellow. That's a sensation. But there is another component responsible for facial recognition, and that interprets the smiley beforehand. So you have this component that interprets smileys. Yeah, some information is reaching the faculty directly, the rational faculty, but you also have a component responsible for recognizing what constitutes a smiley, and that also sends information to the rational faculty. And that gives you the sensation of feeling sympathy. And this is where the knowledge of faces are stored, not the rational faculty. The rational faculty is a blank slate. Another interesting example is memorization of such things as movements, melodies, and speech. Juggling, for example, requires a lot of practice. This is because the sentence, "I know how to juggle with 3 balls," does not refer to knowledge in the sense of epistemology. It refers to some component of the human mind being trained for the required movements. You might in addition consciously know the right movements, but those two are distinct things. Yet another example is sexual preference. This sort of information must be stored somewhere too, and Rand infamously stated that female sexuality is largely hero worship, so she did not in the least assume inequality of human brains in the larger picture. She just argued that the rational faculty is initially empty. Let's remember why this was an why this was at all important in Rand's philosophy. Whether or not you have inert knowledge about juggling or smileys is irrelevant to ethics because it's not conceptual. But the claim of inert conceptual knowledge can indeed be abused. For example, some philosopher can claim, as some have, that some fundamental notions about morality are given to man by nature rather than are learned or discovered. These notions would be inherently conceptual. Let me point out that in order to kill someone, for example, you don't have to do it yourself, you don't have to see him suffer, you don't even have to know him. It can be as remote as clicking buttons or signing a death sentence. Morality is not about feeling sad or seeing a sad face, or pity or compassion or anything like that. Morality is conceptual knowledge. So unlike facial expressions, inherent knowledge about morality would be information located in the rational faculty. And now consider that you let yourself be convinced that the standard of value is society, and that your purpose in life is to serve society, and that this notion is natural and inert to human beings. If you're one of those who don't benefit from that notion, you are likely to hate society. But the idea that you don't feel like you believe a healthy human being should naturally feel, that can then lead to your becoming your own enemy. And that's the purpose of such notions. That's the reason why Rand insisted on the blank slate. The history of philosophy shows that many assumptions to the contrary have been abused. And the blank slate is the simpler assumption anyway, so Occam's razor demands it anyway. So that's why I defend the notion of the blank slate. But there is another point I'd like to make. Consider the following. Two Randians are sitting on a bench debating objectivism. Randian A holds Rand's view on the blank slate, Randian B doesn't, although he does hold a host of other objectivist convictions. Randian B says there obviously is inert knowledge, meaning the likes of knowing what's painful. Randian A then takes this to mean conceptual knowledge and informs Randian B of the wickedness of his ways. Randian B, of course, will then be slightly puzzled. After all, he just saw obvious contradictions. And since he doesn't understand why the blank slate issue is important at all, he can't identify the nature of the disagreement. The nature of the disagreement being that knowledge can mean more than one thing, and the blank slate refers only to the conceptual form in the rational faculty. So he doesn't back off. Randian A, as being the one more knowledgeable about the object of controversy, is more likely to identify the misunderstanding. However, he might either lack the intellectual capability to do so, or he has a long history of encounters with hostile Rand detractors who ridiculed and attacked his beliefs, that over time he has stopped giving critics the benefit of the doubt. So, maybe he just cries, "Burn in hell, mystic," moves along and cuts ties. Randian B, again, might have more than one of those encounters himself, and at some point will wearily put a distance between himself and the label of objectivism. And the Marxist X, who is hiding in a bush behind them overhearing the discussion, will then feel confirmed in his view that objectivism is just a cult for the socially disabled.